Welcome to this first talk for the Shiny in Production conference. So I'm going to start with a small experiment. So let me tell you a story that might sound familiar. So lately I registered for a race. So if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm an ultra-distance runner, which basically is about finding the longest race you can find, like you're going to run for a stupid amount of time for a stupid amount of kilometers. But basically these kind of races are small because like few people are mad enough to register. So basically I registered and I'm on the waiting list. And I'm kind of eager to know if I'm gonna make it, you know. So I check the waiting list every other day. So I just open my phone, I go to the website and I check my spot on the waiting list, and here is what it looks like. So basically, I need to enter my birth date. So I have to open this widget. I have to scroll because, you know, I'm getting older and older, so I have to scroll. It's kind of hard to find the correct year the first time, so I'm looking for the date. I have this other widget that pops, and I have to look again, and just it takes me like 20 seconds just to be able to enter my birth date. And the way I feel when I do that is that the older we get, the more frustrated we are with the internet, because, you know, it takes us so long to scroll and scroll and scroll. So, hello, my name is Colin Fay. I'm coming from France. I'm often frustrated with the internet, and I'm here to talk about why I think we should destroy all widgets. Just a small disclaimer, obviously I don't think that we should destroy all the widgets. I thought about naming my talk Widgets Sometimes Are Bad, but you know, it sells a little bit less. So it's a little bit of trolling with this title, and I obviously don't think we should destroy all widgets. So what we're going to talk about today is what is a widget, why web apps are often frustrating, why this is happening, and where do we go next with that. So just a small preface before I start talking about everything. What does production mean? We're here for Shiny in Production, so what does it mean? And I like to simplify it by saying that a software is in production if it's used. If nobody's using your software, it's not a production software. It's relied upon, and it has real-life impact. When I say it's relied upon, is that people are going to do the job and they're going to use your software. And so they're going to rely on being able to use it correctly, have correct results and everything, and it has real-life impact. And what I mean by that is real-life impact is that if they can't use it correctly, or if they can't use it at all, it's going to have impact on their job, or the way they work, or things they do. Because basically for registering for a race, it's kind of fun to have to scroll, and you know, it's not that important. But for a software that is in production and that people are using on a daily basis, it's kind of different. So what is a widget? A widget is, so I took this from Wikipedia, of course, the only source of truth in the internet. So it's a software component that computer users are going to interact with and manipulate. So the three things that are important in this definition are that it's something that is used by the user, they interact with the widget, and they are going to manipulate it to some extent. So basically they are going to click on it, they are going to use their thumb just to scroll and stuff like that. So these are the elements on your web page that they are going to manipulate and interact with. And the cool thing with widgets is that we are building Shiny apps, and most of the time it's dynamic, so we want people to be able to interact with our web application. We want people to use our app there. We want them to be able to click, to zoom, to do this kind of stuff. And the more widgets we have, the more interaction we have. But what that also means is that it's also more manipulation. So the more widgets you have, the more people are going to have to manipulate your application. The more they are going to have to click, the more they're going to have to scroll, to use the thumb, to things like that. And basically more is not always better, except for memes, of course. So widgets mean that the web apps are often frustrating, and basically that happens because we could do things very simple. If I go back to my example from before, I could simply just type my birth date, I can go and type. But no, the developer has chosen to use a widget. And it kind of makes sense from a developer standpoint, because we all know as developers that dealing with free inputs is very hard. Dealing with date is very hard. So basically dealing with people entering manually their birth date is just a nightmare. So it's easier for us just to put a widget there. And so the widget is going to output the correct format, and you don't have to process it from the back end. So it's kind of easier for us to add the widget here. But it makes life a little bit harder for your user, because it takes 20 seconds just to enter your date of birth and just 3 seconds to type it. So they're often frustrating because we are not patient creatures, so we hate when we have to wait for a page to load. Sometimes there are so many stuff on web apps that you don't know where to look. There are so many things that, it's kind of hard to use an app because there are so many things here. And of course, it ends up with accessibility issues. So the issue with long load time, so what I mean by that is when you go on a web app and it takes like 12 seconds to load, or 20 seconds to load, or 30 seconds to load, is that it's very time consuming for your user. And basically, they are using your app, 20 times a day, or I don't know more. If every time they have to go to your web app, it takes them like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, it's basically just a waste of time. And it's also endurance consuming, because you're going to get angry about the app because it takes so long to load, and basically you have better things to do. Because as a developer, you are building the app, so it's basically your job to see that it works, but when it's just like another tool at your job, and every time you are using it, it takes 20 seconds just to use it, it's kind of, you can get furious about your app. And of course, it's data consuming if you are using it from a cell phone or something like that. So basically, I built a small app which has, so this has nothing like scientific with or everything, but I built a small app with 0 widgets. So it's basically a table, a map, and 2 ggplots. And so I used this tool, which is built in Google Chrome, which computes the load time for your page. So basically, it processes your page, and it does a report about your app. The cool thing is that it doesn't use the browser cache, so it's really like mimicking a person that comes for the first time on your app. And basically with 0 widgets, so table and a map and ggplot, it's something like about 3 seconds to load. And if I had 1 widget, it's more or less 4 seconds. 2 widgets, it's 6, and if I remember correctly, 3 is 8 seconds, and if I add 4 widgets, it's almost 10 seconds or something. So basically, just adding widgets for the sake of it, it's just adding a long load time, and it's even more important if you think that more and more people are using the internet on their cell phone. So this is like small graph I borrowed from the internet about the global mobile traffic in the world. And 1 year ago, more than half of the web traffic was coming from a cell phone. What that means is that, half of the people, if you are building an open app, something that is used by a lot of people, they are going to access it from their mobile. So I'm pretty sure, for example, that the example from before with the birth date, it works well on my laptop. So basically the widget. The issue with this one is that the iPhone widget comes on top of the default widget. So basically it's just a mess because the iPhone takes over. But on my laptop it works well, so I'm assuming that the developer hasn't tried the app on a cell phone. They had just tried this on the laptop, and it works well. So this was about a lot of time, but I want to talk about visual clutter. So this is an example with Plotly, and basically Plotly is kind of awesome for interactive data exploration. But if you show this kind of plot to someone that is not familiar with Plotly, their first reaction, so basically we did that and this is what happened, they're going to try to click on the button on the top. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to hover on the button, they're going to say, what is this for, what is this for? And so it had some element to the page that might not be necessary for displaying this kind of data. So if I can compare, so this is a simple application with a table and a ggplot. So this is very simple. We just want to display 10 results. So the Grand Raid de la Réunion is a race, an ultra race. And basically you have the 10 best times and a graph with this. So it's very simple. You just have to display 10 results, 10 rows. But you can also do it like this, and this is quite tempting. I know we've all been doing this, like going by default for a DT data table. So data table is a widget to explore data which are in a tabular format. So it's kind of awesome. You can search, you can navigate from one page to the other. So this is an awesome widget, but for this example, it might not be useful. So we kind of default to using data table when we are Shiny developers. So we have a table on our design sheet, and we decide that here is a table, and we default to using data table, but for 10 rows, this might not be useful. And the same goes for bar plot with Plotly. Most of the time this is enough. You don't need the interactive with all the buttons and everything. So instead of defaulting to using a widget, I think we should go and start with something very simple and think about, do we need the interactivity? Do we need the widget? Do we need people to be able to search for something inside a 10-row table? And the issue also with widgets is that, so it's an issue with accessibility. So accessibility is the idea of making the web as accessible as possible. So it should be usable, it should work for everyone, whatever your hardware, software, language, location, or ability. So this is something very important. And so if you are building an app for a client, and 400 people are going to use it, at the end of the day, you might have some people there that are using screen readers. So screen readers is a tool for people who are blind, so to navigate on an app. Some people that are colorblind, some people that have mobility issues. So for example, mobility issue is, I don't know, someone with the Parkinson disease that can't scroll until they find the edge. Things like that, which happens a lot, and some people, I don't know, can't use a mouse. They use only their keyboard and everything. So widget adds some, it's harder for them. The more widget they are, the harder it is, because they have to click, they have to navigate, it can be hard. And most of the time it's not that useful. So for example, here there is a built-in tool inside Google Chrome where you can simulate some accessibility things. So it's like the app from before, but with vision impairment. So someone who have a hard time seeing. And basically you can see that it's hard because we can't see very well, but it's hard because there are so many things. So it links to the idea of visual clutter. So there are so many things inside the app that are kind of useless, you know, so they don't know. So they are going to waste time and energy just to understand what are the things and where the information is. So this is an issue with the widgets. And another issue with widgets is that sometimes they don't allow you to correctly choose colors and everything. And if you have too far. If you have people that are colorblind, so I'm sorry if there are people who are colorblind in the room, but this is another tool inside which is built in Google Chrome, and that shows what this plot looks when you are colorblind. So yeah, this is also something that you have to think about. You don't choose your color because they are pretty. And yeah, one day we were building an app for a client, and they said they said that we want this very specific color palette, and we said, yeah, but it's very bad because if you're colorblind, this is what it looks like. And they just said, I don't care, I want this palette. So you know, the client is always right at the end of the day, but this is an issue because if you're just thinking that I'm using this color palette because it's beautiful, it can be hard for some people to read it, and even more with data visualization and stuff. It's very important to think about your colors, and yeah. And of course, we are building Shiny apps at home with an high-speed internet and like 4K screen and everything, but it's not the case for most people. So if you are using, I don't know, beautiful widgets that render well on 4K screen, and that works well with your high-speed internet at home, this is not going to be the case for your clients. And for example, another client, we were building an app where so we were refactoring an app, and actually they had a bunch of, so it were time series, and that was very slow, even with high-speed internet. And they had some complaint because some people weren't able to use the app, and the issue was that they were displaying diagraph of time series for millions of points, and basically you could select as many series as you wanted. So you ended up with 10 diagraphs with millions of points in each. So basically it just take too much time to read, and at the end of the day it was useless. So basically you had a widget with millions of points, and we were like, what's the point, you mean? What's the point of having 1 million like time series entries? So we removed the widget, we built a ggplot with, you know, a smooth line for the tendencies, which was at the end of the day what they wanted to have, you know, the tendency, instead of having, you know, being able to zoom in for one specific second. And they built that because the person that built the proof of concept, they basically just, it worked for them, you know. They had high-speed internet and a large screen and everything, so the diagraph rendered well. But if you go, you know, on the field and you're on an iPad or you're on your phone or something like that with a client, but you don't have access to 4K screen and high-speed internet. So yeah, it's the issue. So that being said, I know that the big question is why is this happening? So why nobody wants their app to suck, and everybody wants their user to be happy. So the big question is, why? Why is this happening? And we've all been to this where there once was a shiny app, and you browse the internet, and you find a widget, and you find another widget, and another widget, and another widget, etc., etc. So basically, you just add widgets and widgets and widgets and widgets because they are cool, and you end up with widgets everywhere. Because you start building your app, and you go on Twitter, and someone has released like a cool widget, and you want to add it to your app, and it feels nice. So I have a small example, which is like the app from. So I did the time load things with here. So this is my last race. So you have like a table, a map, and 2 ggplots. So this is the elevation gain. This is the time for every kilometers. This is the time split every 5 minutes. And then you add a widget, so it takes longer to load. So it renders nicely here because it's the data table renders well. And then you add another widget. So say, hey, I could use a map here, and then you add another widget with a plotly here, a digraph here, and then you add a 4th widget. So with a plotly, so basically you have access to a widget for almost everything. So, and the thing is that you might not realize it with this example that I showed you because your browser caches the widget, so all the scripts that are loaded inside your app. But yeah, Google Chrome has built-in a tool just to mimic the load time for a new person. So the fourth app takes like about 10 seconds to load on a fresh browser. And at the end of the day, the hard truth is you don't need that many widgets. For example, for my example from before, do I need a plotly for a bar graph? I have enough information with a standard and well-written ggplot. Do I need a data table, or do I need to style correctly my table or stuff? So you have to ask the question is, are you like using this widget because it's cool, because you like it, or because your user actually needs it, So why all the widgets? Because most of the time they are required, they are desired, they are very easy to integrate, and of course they are cool. But they are required because if you're building a Shiny app, you're building some kind of interactive data analysis tool, and so people need the widget to explore, they need the widget to go into the data and to build a report and everything. So they are at the very root of interactivity on the web, and they are very nice and they are very cool. And they are often desired because plotly, for example, if you have a scatter plot, you can zoom and you can be more precise, or if you have a digraph or time series, it's kind of nice to be able to zoom and things like that. And it's often desired. It's often a feature that is desired. And of course, the clients often say so. So you don't really have a choice. So you can still advise them not to. But most of the time, clients like things that are interactive because they don't have any idea of or any consideration about all the things that I've just said. And of course, there are one thing which is very cool with Shiny is that they are very easy to integrate. So if I have my app from before with arrays and just adding new widgets. For example, for the table, I just have to change my render table to DT render data table, and it's kind of fast. It's very easy. Same goes with plotly, ggplotly. So you take your ggplot and you create a plotly object. So it's kind of very easy to integrate, which is a very good thing, but it can be a trap because it's so easy that we're just gonna throw a data table here because it's very easy to use. And of course they are cool, so it's kind of this is an example with a Shiny app with the Lego. So basically they are very cool. If you show someone this Shiny app, they're going to say, yeah, it's very nice, it's very cool to be able to explore. But here it's kind of useful. You can use it, you can actually use it, but from time to time it's not that useful. So at the end of the day, it's all about finding a balance between the developer complexity and the user complexity. Because I think that most of the time, if it's easy for the user, it's more complex for the developer, and it's easy for the developer, it's more complex for the user. And because if you think back to the example about the date picker in the beginning, it's parsing date and parsing the inputs for the from the user is kind of hard if it's free text. So if you ask someone, even if you say, enter your date with number, dash number, etc., you still have to check for this input. You still have to check if this input is correct. So it's kind of easier for the user because you don't have to go into the widget and scroll and everything. They can just type free text and it works. But it makes life a little bit more complex for the developer because you have to parse the data. And it's kind of the same for the DT data table from before. As you've seen on the app, my table on the first page was not formatted correctly, so you have to spend a little bit more time just thinking about how to format your table, how to fit in the columns and everything. And so it's kind of harder for you as a developer and more complex to build a simple table, but using data table, it's just going to fit nicely inside your page. You don't have to think about CSS and stuff like that and how to center stuff and everything. So it's easier for you as a developer, but it makes things harder for the user because they might not need this interactivity, they might not need to learn how to use it. And for the example with Plotly, if you have never used Plotly before, the first thing you are going to think is that it feels complex because there are all these buttons, and if you move your mouse over, there are things that happen. So it can feel hard for a user to be faced with a Plotly because it's there are so many things happening. And on the other end, if it's easy for the developer, it's usually more complex for the user. So this is the example with the widget and the date picker. So it's all about finding a balance between what is actually useful for the user, because if we go back to this definition of what is in production, if you are going to send your application to production, some people are going to use your app, they are going to rely on your app to work, they are going to rely on the fact that they are going to be able to use it and it's going to be easy for them, and they don't care if Plotly is cool or because this is like a new hype widget that everybody in the R community is talking about. It's basically just a tool for them. It's something that they use on a daily basis to do the job. And for example, if you have like a ggplot, we can do right-click, copy image, and paste it on Slack. But if you have like a Plotly on interactive things, you know, you have to find the button to export. You have to, or you are going to have to do a screenshot, and you'd be surprised about how many people are not able to do a screenshot of their screen. So basically, it's about finding this balance between how many time am I authorizing myself to spend on this feature, and how many time my users are going to be willing to spend learning my app. So it's like always a matter of balance between finding these two things. So that being said, where do we go next? So the good news is that the internet is not becoming more frustrating because you're getting older, but because it's not designed, because it's designed without the user experience first in mind. So basically, if you think that, I mean that we tend as a developer to think that if someone can't use our app, it's their fault, but it's not true. It's not their fault, it's your fault. Because if I'm building an app for someone and they don't know how to use it, yeah, it's my fault because it's badly designed. It's either because it's too complex, there are too many widgets, there are too many things that they can do, it's not that obvious. It's not their fault. It's not, you can't expect someone who is working and who is given a new tool to be willing to spend, I don't know, 1 day learning how the tool works. They just want the tool to work straight away. They don't want to know how to use it. So they want to have a good user experience. This is what you will be looking for as a developer. You have to think about the people that are going to use your app first. And one thing which is kind of interesting to do is watching someone that has never used your app actually use your app for the first time. So it's kind of, it's the thing we did with Plotly. So I sometimes I send my app to my clients and we screen share and they start using the app. So, and the things with Plotly, for example, is that the first thing everyone do is looking for the button. And why is it useful? What does the button do? Do I actually need it? And yeah, most people are not eager to learn how to use this widget. They just want they want the plot that they can copy and paste inside a PowerPoint report. So yeah, just to sum up, someone once told me if there is something that people are good at, it's too much of a good thing. So I don't think widgets are inherently bad. It's just that they are good, they are great, but we are very good at putting too many good things inside our app. So yeah, it's always a balance of trying to find a balance between are they good or are they too much. So widgets are awesome. They are at the root of all web application. They are great for interactive data exploration. They are cool, they are easy to integrate as a developer. But at some point, they are good until they're not. You know, because your app can become very slow. It can be harder to manipulate it. It can be hard to interact with your app if there are too many widgets. So some things to remember before I go. So you're not human user. You have to put yourself in the shoes. Simple is beautiful and accessibility is king. So this is a very important rule. It's easier is never a good reason for using something. And if your user experience is bad, your app is bad. And one of the most important things is that I still don't know if I'm going to make it to this race, but I'm sure I'm going to check in a few minutes and still complain about the UX. If you want to learn a bit more about this, where we have a chapter in Engineering Shiny, so there is a chapter about user experience. in the book. It's free to read online, or you can grab a paper copy. And of course, I'm here for the questions. Thanks.